It started as an ordinary Tuesday morning at Riverside University, the kind of day that promised little more than lectures, coffee, and tired eyes behind laptop screens. But by the end of that class, no one would forget the name John Kennedy, the quiet freshman who taught his arrogant professor a lesson that went far beyond calculus. Professor Harold Minton had a reputation that echoed through the math department halls. A brilliant, yes, but brutal. His sharp tongue and colder demeanor were notorious among students. He was the kind of teacher who believed humiliation was a form of motivation, who called it academic sharpening. To most, it felt more like cruelty dressed in intellect. That morning, the lecture hall was packed. Dozens of students filled the seats, notebooks open, calculators ready. As Professor Minton scribbled an impossibly long integral across the whiteboard, he turned to the class with his signature smirk, that smug curve of his lips that usually preceded a student's embarrassment. "Can anyone solve this?" he asked, marker still in hand. "Or shall we skip to the part where I prove you're not ready for advanced calculus?" A few students exchanged nervous glances. None dared to raise their hand. Then, from the back row, a quiet voice spoke. "I can try," said John Kennedy. Heads turned. John wasn't exactly the talk of the class, a shy, soft-spoken boy who usually kept to himself. He was polite, almost invisible. He didn't boast, didn't interrupt, and never seemed to struggle, but never flaunted it either. Professor Minton arched an eyebrow. "Oh, really?" he said, mock amusement in his tone. "Mr. Kennedy, is it? By all means. Join us at the board. Let's see what you've got." As John walked to the front, whispers rippled through the class. Everyone could feel the tension at the professor's challenge, the students' quiet courage. Minton handed John the marker. "Be careful," he said. "You're dealing with a problem that has stumped half the class already." John nodded, studied the equation for a few seconds, and began writing. His movements were steady, deliberate, confident, but not showy. Within moments, the lecture hall fell silent. The way he handled each step was almost mesmerizing. Fluid transitions, flawless logic, no hesitation. Professor Minton's smirk began to fade. He moved closer, watching the symbols unfold like poetry. When John finished, he turned around and quietly said, "That's the solution." The room was still. Then, a low murmur broke out among the students, a disbelief, awe, admiration. Minton's eyes darted across the board, rechecking every line. His jaw tightened. Not a single mistake. Job had not only solved the problem, he'd done it using a shorter, more elegant method than the professor's own. "How did you?" Minton began, but the words faltered. John shrugged slightly. "It's a special case of the residue theorem. I read about it in a paper last year." That was the moment everything shifted. The professor's authority as armor of intellect and superiority cracked in front of everyone. He cleared his throat and said stiffly, "Well, a broken bar, impressive work, Mr. Kennedy." But the class saw more than academic respect. They saw something deeper, a man forced to confront his pride, and a student who didn't need to boast to prove his worth. After class, students surrounded John, asking how he learned so much, how he stayed so calm. He smiled shyly. "Math is just a broken bar, beautiful when you stop trying to show off and start listening to what it's really saying," he told them. Word spread across campus like wildfire. The quiet freshman who humiliated the toughest professor had become an overnight legend. But John never let it change him. He kept studying, kept helping classmates, kept being the same humble soul who believed knowledge wasn't about ego, it was about connection. A week later, Professor Minton called John to his office. The tone was different now, and no sarcasm, no condescension, just respect. "You taught me something," the professor admitted. "Not about calculus, about humility." John smiled. "We're all still learning, sir. Even the best of us." That moment sealed a bond of mutual admiration that would last beyond the semester. Professor Minton began to change as classes became less about intimidation and more about inspiration. Students noticed, and every time he spoke of problem solving, he'd glance toward John, who'd often sit quietly in the back, still taking notes. Years later, when John Kennedy graduated with honors and delivered his valedictorian speech, he said something that made even Professor Minton stand and applaud. Genius isn't about being the smartest person in the room, John said. It's about staying curious enough to learn even from those who try to break you. And as the audience erupted in applause, Professor Minton smiled this time, not with pride, but with gratitude. Because sometimes, the greatest lesson a teacher can give via a broken bar is to be taught by his student. This story reminds us that brilliance doesn't always come wrapped in confidence or arrogance. Sometimes, it sits quietly at the back of the room, waiting for the right moment to remind the world that humility and intelligence are not opposites, but allies.